Okay, so we're creating a new application, and we have the layout file here. Um, what do I do if I want to see the XML instead of the actual pictures for the layout? So let me get rid of the text view that comes with it. And I'm going to drag a button and the text view onto my screen. Okay? Now, if I look at the XML for this button and this text screen, there's certain pieces of information that pop out at me. It automatically gets an ID when you drag a new one on, and you can change that to something that makes more sense to you if you're using several buttons and you want one to be the yes button and one to be the no button or something like that. But if you only have one, there's really no point. The same thing with text views. You can change that name, but if you change the name, you only want to change the part after the slash. The @ plus ID /, that part has to be there. Does everybody get that? Okay? And for what it's worth, I'm recording this. I'll make the recording available to you. So especially for those of you who are behind, pay attention to this and don't try to go along with it. Okay? Now that I have my controls, and why is the ID important? Because if we want to refer to it from code, we need there to be an ID. Now, if you just want it to show up on the screen, you can delete this line. It won't hurt anything. But if you want to refer to it from code, you need the ID in order to refer to it. What else do we know about this layout that means that we're not quite ready to move on? There's an asterisk next to the name. That means we need to save it. So for those of you who are wondering, when I walk behind you and I say you haven't saved that yet, that's the problem. The reason I know that is because there's an asterisk next to the name. A lot of things will not get recognized until the file has been saved. Good, thank you. So when I'm looking for the .java file, you're going to look inside of source, look inside your package. And here we have the .java file. Now, this first part up here where it says public void on create, every single activity gets that automatically. This is the part of the program that runs automatically when the screen is loaded. Okay? The second thing, on create options menu, it has to do with the menu options button that's on an Android phone. We can ignore that. So if we want this to go away, not delete it, but we just want it to hide so we don't have to pay attention to it, what do? Anyone? It's right there on the screen. We click on the collapse button, this little minus sign next to the @override. If you click on that, then that goes away. And what happens is everything involved with this routine is on one line. So that means that this bracket isn't involved with this subroutine. Everything that's on this subroutine is in one line. If we deleted this one line, then on create options menu is gone. The fact that this curly bracket is still here means that it's part of something else. It's not part of this. So for those of you who are trying to put stuff after this and you're putting it in the wrong place, if you collapse this second routine, then you know you're past it. So you can just put your cursor on the end, hit return, and then you are definitely after the routine. Does everybody get that? Ms. Merrick? Is that a yes or a no? Okay. Because if not, we can go over it, because I know that this is something that several of you have had trouble with this last go-round. Now, if we wanted to if I wanted to create a variable called myButton of type button, what would I type?
Underneath the set content view.
Well, we'll get into where it goes in a second, but that's good that you know that. But if I wanted to create a button of type, a button called myButton of type button, what would I type?
Okay, you type uppercase B, U-T-T-O-N, space, and then lowercase b, U-T-T-O-N, equals,
I didn't say I was mapping it to anything. I was just creating it. So you can just stop right there, and that much is good. So as she was saying, that she would put it here. Now, it could go anywhere. It doesn't have to go here. We can put it someplace else, and we'll learn that later in the class. But since this is the part of the program that happens automatically, and this line right here, set content view, r.layout.activity main, that is the literal part where it goes and gets the file and puts the stuff on the screen. So there's no point in me mapping to the button until the button's on the screen. If I try to map to the button and the button's not on the screen yet, the program will implode. Does everybody get that? So we're telling it, go in the room and get the girl with the green sweater, but nobody's come in the room yet. We have to wait until the people have gone in the room. You get that? Okay, so as she said, capital B button, I said I wanted to call it my button, semicolon, and we're good. Now, this red underline tells, under the word button, tells us that we have an error. And if we hover over it, we've talked about the idea of libraries. The fact of the matter is, right now, Eclipse doesn't know what a button is. And it's asking you, you've put this thing in the position where you declare stuff, like strings and integers, it knows what those are automatically. But a button, I don't know what a button is. And it tells you, as a suggestion, one of the things you could do is import the button from the Android widget library, which is what I want it to do. And then once I do that, I don't think you heard me, Jerobi. Just follow this. Literally, it's recording right now. I'll make the video available to you guys. Now, the red goes away, so we have a variable called myButton of type button. And I saw several of you, bless your hearts, trying to get all the yellow to go away. We're not really to the point that we can get all the yellow to go away. The yellow is a warning. It's telling you that you're doing things that aren't suggested, but it's not something that will stop your program from running. So in this case, the yellow is telling me I've created a variable that I've never used. The program will still run, it just won't do anything. So it's saying, you're probably expecting something to be done with this. I'm just letting you know you haven't done anything with this. Does everybody get that? It's like the credit card company saying, you know, you applied for this credit card, and we haven't seen you use it in the last month, and we really want to get our fees out of you, so please use the credit card. Does everybody get that? No? Damaris? Okay. So, now, you were giving me the rest of the command, pound. So it would be my button equals what? Open paren. Capital B button.
And then after the close paren,
Mm-hmm.
lowercase f-i-n-d, find view by ID. r.id
No. My button is what it's called in the code. What was it called in the layout?
Button 1.
Was it called button 1?
It's just button.
No. I don't remember. Was it button 1 or was it button 01? Button 1.
Button 1.
Okay, now this is the standard format. First part, everything that we're talking about, just what's happening after the equal sign. Whenever you're mapping a variable to what's on your layout, the first part, you're telling it what it is that you're going to grab. Or actually, let's go in the opposite direction. The last part, you're telling it what you're grabbing. In this case, we're going to the layout and we're getting button 1. Okay? The second part, you're telling it to find view by ID. Everything that you can see is a view. So you're telling it to go find something by the ID, which is button 1. So you're telling it to go find something on the layout called button 1. And then once you find it, you're just letting it know what you're going to find is going to be a button. Because it could be called anything. You don't have to call it button 1. You could call it Roger. But once you call it Roger, nobody knows what that is. So you're going to say find view by ID r.id.roger if that's what you renamed your button. Does everybody get that? You're casting it as a button and you're putting it in that variable. Okay? Now, once you have it in the variable, you still really haven't done anything with it. You've mapped something to it, you've set it, but you haven't done an action that the user would notice. And what we're going to do here is we're going to say that the button, it has an on-click listener. Now, to set an on-click listener, we need to have an on-click listener. Now, creating an on-click listener is just like creating a routine. It is a part of the program that exists outside of the routines. So you wouldn't do it inside of here, above the curly bracket. I like to put mine just before the end of the program. So one way to think about it, to make sure you're in the right place, is go to the last curly bracket and then go up one line. Does everybody get that? So we're going to go to the last curly bracket, go up one line, and then the way that I like to do it to make sure that I don't get discombobulated by matching brackets or whatever, is I like to say on-click listener, then whatever I'm calling it, my listener equals new on-click listener, open close parens, open close curly brackets, semicolon. Now, the reason I do this is the minimum amount of information you can give the computer to tell it what you're doing. I have created an on-click listener called my listener that is empty. And then when I try to do it, it's going to tell me the computer can fill out the rest of this for you. The first error is because of what? We need to import it because what does Eclipse know what an on-click listener is yet? No. So I need to tell it what I'm doing. So if I hover over that, it'll say import on-click listener. Now there's two there. One is from the Android.view.view library. One's from the Android.content.dialog interface library. At this stage in the game, we want the first one. When we get to dialog interfaces, you'll know it. Okay? So we want the regular one. Now there's still some red there, and if I hover over that one, it'll tell me that there is an unimplemented method. There's something it's expecting me to do when I'm creating an on-click listener, and I didn't do it. So if I click that, it'll give me the rest of the body of my on-click listener without me having to type it. And now, even though it doesn't do anything, this is a properly formatted on-click listener. All the curly brackets are in the right place. And if you can see, it's like there's a curly bracket, then a curly bracket followed by a semicolon, and then the last curly bracket. So it's hard to know exactly where the semicolon goes if you try to type it out yourself. But if you do it like this, it's kind of automatic. Does everybody understand what I just did? And like I said, the video's done, so I'll send that to you guys. Now, I have an on-click listener called my listener. So when I set the on-click listener, I'm just going to tell it the name of the listener that I just created, which goes here. And so right now, there's no red in my program at all. So will this program run? Yeah. Yes. Will it do anything?
You have to save it first.
Well, yeah, but when you hit run, it saves it automatically. But will it do anything?
No.
Why not?
You didn't tell it what to do once you click it.
We didn't tell it what to do once we clicked the button. Okay? Now, to set the value of something, we need to use the set text routine. There's a little trick about set text, though. Set text doesn't always work if you're trying to use the text directly. To be on the safe side, you need to put the text that you want inside of a string first, and then use the variable with set text. Which is to say, if I did this, What comes next, Jerobi?
R dot ID dot dot text. I'm trying to remember.
Where would I look to find? Where would I look to find the name?
Under text view.
Yeah, but what file would I look in to find what I named the text view?
In your XML file.
Yes. So if I go back here, I can see that I named it what? Tell you what, come up here. Come on. Where's the text view?
Right here.
Okay. So what line of that tells you what the name of the text view is?
Okay, large text.
No.
The first line, the text view 1.
Okay, text view 1. And any capital letters in that?
View. So it would be text, capital V.
Like this?
1. Text view 1.
Okay, did everybody get that? Now, if I did this, often this will give you a problem. It'll look like it looks like it compiles, but it won't work for you. What will always work if you do it right is if you say so for those of you who were having trouble, this works because you're setting this value to a variable, and then you're setting the text to the variable. And the reason for the bug, I'm not sure, but I have noticed it on some of you. You're having trouble. But this is all the basic steps that we would need to create a button that maps to the button, to create the listener that tells the button what to do when it's clicked, and then the action, basically, that I was asking you to do in the quiz. Now, I was telling you to say Gertrude instead of Abigail or some other stuff. But basically, as far as setting a value for that text view, this is how you would do it. Now, if you wanted to set the text that was on the button, you do it the same way, except instead of mapping those text view, you would map the button. And for the button, you would say mybutton.setText, say goodbye, or whatever we change it to. Does everybody get that? Yes, no, maybe?
What's the difference between text view and edit text? Is there ever a situation?
The text view is text. Edit text is a text box. When you see just text on your screen, do you think you can type on it? But if you see a text box, you probably think that you can type there, right? Even if there's already a value there, if they give you a form that looks like, if they give you a form that looks like this with this in front of it, can you type on this on the left? No. Can you type in this on the right? Yes. The one on the right is an edit text. The one on the left is a text view. For the general purposes, text views are text, not only text that you can display, but text that the user cannot affect. Edit text boxes, you might display them. Like if you look in Bison Web and you're like looking up the email address that Howard has on record for you, they probably will have it in a text box because you can change it if you've decided you now want to use Gmail instead of Yahoo, right? Is everybody good with that? Awesome. Now, this is not just Hello World, this is also Hello World buttons and text. Okay, so if you can do this, then you should be up through lesson 2. Once we get into 3 and 4, it gets a little more interesting. But let me stop this before it gets too long to upload.